Hello and well met. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Pardon for the silence. Had a little technical difficulties with the audio. Whenever you have an update to Windows or to Streamlabs, OBS, or anything like that, it'll reset your value. So I had to go in and change it back to my default setting. That's kind of annoying. But anyway, so today we're going to go over a few things. So one of them being that I'm going to build a test character for the maps I'm going to put together today. So I'm going to do some line of sight, but I'm going to build a character, and so we're going to do a bunch of stuff. It's going to be kind of a long video. So one of the first things out of the box is the dice. So there are a couple new beautiful dice that are created by Smiteworks, with Josh over there. If you are a Fantasy Grounds fan and you use Fantasy Grounds, if you're the GM or the player, you can get new dice if you want to. You have to purchase your own. So if you're going to be at someone else's table and you want the fancy dice too, you'll get them as well as a player. So if you open up the dice box here, up here on the top right, you'll be presented with this menu. And what you'll find is as you scroll down, you'll be able to see these new sets down here. So we have the Wizard Rot set and the Artificer set. They're both sold separately. So you can customize this one down here in the bottom right that actually has the base for it. And if you look carefully, it kind of has like metallic dice. And since I have these so small, I'm going to go ahead and increase the size. That's another thing you can do is I'm going to bring the size up a little bit so they're a little bit more visible. And the other thing is that this one here in particular, the base, you can recolor that one. All the rest of these are kind of like defaults. They kind of look like something you'd buy on the market if you purchase new dice. It looks pretty cool. I like how these turned out. Pretty nice looking. So this Artificer base, you can actually come up here to the colors for the body of it. You can kind of move this around. Kind of gives you an idea of what colors you can play with here. You can do like this magenta thing. And then for the text, you can also change that too. So it's a pretty neat combinations here. I think I'm going to use this Artificer one and then make this kind of like my theme. So that's what's nice about the dice. You kind of theme it towards whatever you're working on. So today I'm going to actually put together, or not put together, but I'm going to put the line of sight and such on the actual maps themselves. So like there'll be some drow maps, some kind of spider related things. So maybe I'll leave it at this purple. But then you have these Wizard Rot ones too that have a little bit different texture. See, it has a little fleur-de-lis thing. You got like a gold antique look. Here's a white gold, and you have also this storm color. So you got a lot of options. So you can do this rot base or an inverted one, so you can kind of see the text a little bit better, which is kind of cool. So it just depends on what your needs are at your table. But again, if you're a new player or something like that, you'll have to get your own dice, which also means getting a basic subscription and just like a dice account essentially. But if you're a GM, you can use these. They'll display for the players, but they just can't assign their own. So that's that. So I'll go ahead and leave these dice up here. Out. And I didn't hit OK, so it didn't commit to the changes. So if you're going to make changes on the dice, you got to hit OK. So OK, so let's go try that again. So again, going to the base, body, and then I wanted to customize it to like this kind of purplish color. And I wanted to use the inverted, so you can see it a little bit more, or you can use a darker one, which I kind of like better. And then this actual text, if you want to change the text, you can move this around too. So I'll probably go with like a kind of an orange color. That's kind of cool. So we'll see. I think that I like that. So I'll hit OK and then OK. why it's, there we go. Okay, so when you do that, you have to commit to the change. Otherwise, it's not going to take whatever you change it to. So that over a little and hit, and then go ahead and close this. That will keep your settings firm. All right, so next thing I want to do is, let's see, I want to also take and show some maps that I'm going to be working with today. So I want to grab my folder here, assets. So whenever you bring in a bunch of assets, you want to try to organize those up front. So rename the files, resize them, whatever. And that's better than trying to do it in Fantasy Ground, because if you move them around or change the file names after the fact, you might run into some problems. So I have images folder and the data folder. So I put the maps in a particular folder, and I put it on the higher level instead of the campaign level. And the reason I did that, because I might want to actually access these maps during a different campaign. So I don't want to have to dig through a bunch of other folders. So just putting them in the data folder and then in a subfolder on the upper level on the back end of Fantasy Grounds makes it easier than trying to do that retroactively back end. So here, this is called Moepsii's Maps. If you guys don't know Moepsii, he's a community member in the Fantasy Grounds Academy. He hasn't been very active lately, but I went to his website. He has an Etsy page. I actually went and checked it out. I haven't been here in a while, but essentially he's got all these different map packs. They're about 14, 15 bucks. Each one comes with like 25 to 50 different maps. And they're kind of modular and they're really decent and they work well for VTT. So if you ever need some good maps, good price, there's that. He sells them on the drive-through RPG as well, but I think he gets more money through. And I think this is a good buy if you like pre-made maps. I'm going to be using some of these, but the ones that I have are actually commissioned for me. I actually paid for these and had them design these and kind of work with them on it. It's a couple years ago we did this. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the folder asset. So you do that whenever you bring in new content when you're in Fantasy Grounds. Just in case, that'll update all your directories and folders. And now that I have these, what I'm going to do is come over to the right-hand side under Campaign and go to Images. So I don't have these images yet in my campaign images, but I'm going to use the drop down, and then I'm going to edit this list or edit group, and then drop down, and it'll say like Group 1 or something like that by default. So let's see, I'm going to hit this Add Category. There's Group 1. So I'm just going to call this Moepsii's Maps. Like that. And then I'm going to hit the edit button again to get out of the edit mode. And now I'm going to go navigate to Moepsii's Maps. So as you can see, there's nothing in here. So if you have all of your images that you want to use in your game up front, or let's say you're building something, and once you have everything organized as such, you, instead of dragging these over one by one, you can actually import them en masse through this. So en masse, you can take this command up here, which is called create from campaign assets. So you really only want to do this when you got a bunch of stuff and you're trying to import it all at once. It doesn't really help if you're doing it incrementally. Then in that case, you can just import the file or just drag it over. So in this case, I'm going to do them all at once. So I have that and I have an idea of what I'm after. Then I can hit create from campaign assets. The only problem is that I put these in the upper level, so I can't use this macro to pull them all in. I'll have to do it manually because I did put them on the top layer instead of the campaign layer. That's the difference between where you store them. So when you store them at the campaign level, it's better to do that when you're building a module or doing conversions. When you want to access the maps in every campaign or in a lot of different campaigns, you want to store this in a higher level folder, which is the back end of Fantasy Grounds. That way it's easier to get to from regardless of which campaign you're in. And on top of that, it doesn't isolate it to the 5e and that sort of thing. It kind of better to store it on the top level if you just plan on using them and playing with them. But if you're going to be doing a conversion and selling it and linking it and all that kind of stuff, better if you put it in the campaign folder, and then you can import all the assets at once. And done meaning that you have everything edited, labeled, organized, subfolders, all that sort of thing. So I'm going to just drag these over one by one. This is how most people would probably use this. And all this does is it creates the image within the campaign. And it allows for you to customize and narrow down which ones you want in your campaign and not just all of them. There's the Hero Hall, the Ruins, Flowing Webs, Lava Cave, Portal Cavern, Spider Nest, different Spider Nest, Mushrooms. Okay, so those are all of the images in that pack. So it takes a little bit longer to do that, but in most cases you're only going to need a few anyway. So there's no problem with doing it that way. The reason I brought this up because if you have it in your campaign folder, you can bring them all over at once. Now that I have those, another fun thing that you can do with these is, you can name them here if you want. So you can change the title in Fantasy Grounds, but it does not change the actual file name on your hard drive. So when you do this, it's going to require that you use this campaign and this naming convention here, as opposed to doing that on the back end of when you're creating. So if I want to fix this, what I'd have to do is, you notice that this had a weird character in it. So if I go to the back end, I can fix that, but then you're going to have to also fix this link. So I'm going to go through and show you how to do that in case this ever happens to you. But you don't want to do this if you have this linked already to a bunch of other story entries and that sort of thing. This is like in the beginning. You want to fix this stuff now. So if I wanted to fix that file name, noticed it was misspelled, it had some weird stuff going on. So what I'm going to do is go into Assets, and from here, I want to take and go to navigate to the folder. So the folder was in the data folder and in a subfolder called Moepsii Maps. And if I come in here and I go click on folder, it's actually going to take me to the back end. But what it did is it takes me to the back end of the campaign instead of the master folder. So to go to the master folder, I have to go to Fantasy Grounds, which is the main directory, and then go into the images folder, which is in the actual, in this case, this would be images. And then here where it says Moepsii's Maps Custom, double click that. And here's the drow spider n equals nest. That's not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this. Now what you do is you have to refresh so that it gets updated. And as you notice, the map entry goes with this question mark. So this is something you might see if you do that, if you change any file names around after the fact. You don't want to do that when you've already got a campaign going and you have it linked to stuff. And I've seen this quite a bit. Some people says, why can't I see my maps or whatever? Well, this isn't the only reason why, but this is one of the reasons why that happens. So I changed the file name and I moved this, or if you move it to a different directory, that's a no-go. So now to fix this, what I have to do is come over here where this drow spider nest was. See, it's blank now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on my images list, hit delete item, and then confirm it. That just deletes that image, and now I'm going to re-drag it over the new file name. Just re-drag this over. So here we go. That's essentially what you have to do to fix the links so that if they're broken, that's the right way to do it. The only problem now is if I have this linked to 50 other things in Fantasy Grounds, I need to go in and make double sure, maybe re-drag the link over to whatever it's linked to fix the link. Because if you don't, you're going to get problems, errors. So that's important that you kind of know that. That's something that people run into when they're using images in Fantasy Grounds. So if you rename them or you move the directory, it's going to change how they're linked in Fantasy Grounds. So you'll have to go in and re-update all the links that they're attached to if you've already used it in 50 places. It's better to do this in the beginning if you know and have it fixed. But if you have to go back after the fact, process to it. And one of them is going back, rename the file, move the file if you have to, then refresh, and then go back and find out where or know ahead of time where that thing was linked to, because this could be linked to stories and all kinds of stuff. So if you don't fix it in the beginning, it gets harder and harder to track down what the problem is, and it can make a mess. The real trick of it is to not rename the files and don't move them around once they're imported. But sometimes you don't have that choice. So if you're going to do that, just keep that in mind that you're going to have to fix it all the way through. You can't just fix the file and then hope that everything's going to auto update behind it. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to go and fix them. So that is essentially how you would deal with that issue. I've seen on the forums occasionally someone will say, hey, my player can't see this file here, and it has a big question mark. There's a couple reasons for that. Generally, the most common reason is that their computer is blocking the data. So they can still be logged into your table, but if the firewall is preventing data from being transferred back and forth, or if you have an antivirus that's scanning the files and not allowing them through, that's one way that you'll get that question mark and they won't see anything. The other occasionally is when the combat tracker entries themselves and the link from the NPCs and the players to the map get corrupted. If that's the case, you just delete the token off of the map and then put it back on from the combat tracker. That usually fixes that problem. And then again, this last issue was if you update the directory or the name of the file on the back end, but you don't update it in Fantasy Grounds and you don't go back to everything it's linked to, that's going to give you problems. So that's just a way to troubleshoot images. But anyway, so that is one of the ways. So I'm not sure which map I actually want to put line of sight on. So what we could do is make a fun table. Probably won't ever need this, but if you ever wanted to, you can use the tables to help you auto select or to randomly choose some map or art asset. A lot of people like cards and stuff, so this might be a way to do that. It's a little bit of tedious work, but it's kind of fun. Let's see, so I'm going to go to here down at the bottom, and I'm going to manually add a, let's see, this is going to be adding essentially just a table, real basic one, and we'll just call it the random map selection. And what this will do, if you make this table, later on you can build other tables and link to it. Essentially, when you want to do some kind of hex crawl, or maybe it's a deck of cards or something, you can randomly roll and it will put the link in the chat so that you can choose, players can look at it too. And what I'm going to do is label this so it's random map selection. You can make it, title it better obviously, but I'm just giving it a generic name right now. So random map selection. And then what you'll do is you'll select and you'll put up whatever, like whatever maps or images. It doesn't have to be maps, but there's that. And the output format is chat. So when it outputs, it'll put it in the chat. So we can see we got 3, 6, 13 maps. So we can make an uneven table of 13, or you can even weight the table so that some of the others don't come up as often. So what we'll do is we'll make 13 rows. So I'm going to go edit list and go to add row or column. So we're going to add rows here. I don't even know how many I just put on there, but it's close enough. All right, so now that you have that, now I'm just going to take these and drag and drop them over to the map table. So this is just going to give me option to roll instead of having to choose. And this might work out in another situation for you. So you may not need it for this, but it might be something that you want to do in your campaign, especially like hex crawls and stuff. Then you can just roll and you can say, okay, the next hex is this, and sort of thing. Or like I said, you can use a deck of cards. Maybe you have custom images, and it just selects that image and then just play off of whatever cards that's kind of up to you, however you want tables. But in this case, I want to show that you can do this, but also I want it to randomly pick a map for me to do for the map challenge. So I'm going to do the line of sight on there, but I don't want to just pick anyone. I want the system to do it. I don't care if it's hard or easy, but essentially that's all the different images. Now you can weigh this. So the one I probably would weigh the least amount would probably be the one with the port, but all the rest of them would be a little bit common. So you can change the range of these, but I don't need to do that today. So I'm just going to put the range of numbers in manually. So I'm just typing in 3 and 3 on each side. There's no weight to it. But you can make some a little bit more likely to come up by changing variables, how you want to weight the tables. So this kind of illustrates some of the fun things you can do with Fantasy Grounds and also some functionality that you might want to add to your campaign. So I'm only doing this just to kind of show how Fantasy Grounds works as opposed to just everything's done, do what I do. I would kind of like you to see some of the process and enjoy some of the things you can do with Fantasy Grounds. Now, I don't know if this is very joyous. It's very tedious, to be honest, but I just want you to see the truth in it, see how it can be. So that was kind of the long roundabout way to do this. So this is a new table now. So the visibility is set to on so that if I roll, it will show. And then its output is to chat, so it should go to the chat area. So what I'm going to do is roll, and we'll see what map we get. And that's the one we're going to put the line of sight on. And the other reason I'm doing this is to practice, right? So I don't have any specific agenda other than to help people learn the platform and to get some practice in myself. I want to get good. I want to get efficient. And the only way I'm going to do that is to use the tool. So I'm going to go ahead and roll. And Spider Nest Maze is what came up. So this is an actually very simple map, but it has some value in regards to the fact that it can overdo it. So we're going to go ahead and do this map with some line of sight, and we're also going to talk about that. So to get going on this, so I want to take and start looking at the map. So what do we got? We got some webs here, we got some cocoons or some walls, and I don't see too many other features in here that are really going to be a big problem. But what I am going to illustrate is the necessity to keep the data points down. So that's all the little dots. What I want to do is first, now that I have this set up, first thing you do with any map, even if you're starting from scratch, is to set your grid. So I'm going to come over here to the right, and I'd like to set the grid. So that is something that's paramount to Fantasy Grounds. Now, if you already have a grid painted on it, you're going to have to find a way to line it up, which can be problematic if you don't know the scale. So this is scaled at 50. I think that's a little bit small for Moepsii. I think he does his at, I think we agreed on 100 or something like that. Let's take a look. Yeah, so this is 100, and that's actually right. You can tell because of the way it lines up on the right and on the bottom. So I always check the opposite corner. So on a map like this, I'll look at the far right and the far left. Those are even, they're lined up. And then I kind of look at it in scale, like how large is this tunnel as opposed to, what the needs are. And to be honest, I think half the scale of this would be better, because if you have a token and they're moving through these tunnels and they're this thin or this narrow, it's going to be problematic. They're going to get stuck. So I'm going to back this off to 50, which is probably the original scale. And it still lines up. It's just half the size. And that actually makes more sense because now the tunnel is, 5 to 10 feet wide instead of just like 4 or 3 feet wide. So it's important that you do that. So if you get a tunnel or any kind of maps like these that have caverns or these windy things here, it's very difficult to use because you'll get stuck in all the little nooks and crannies. That's another thing I want to point out when you're doing caverns, especially like this, is that for gameplay, it really sucks if you go too far with the line of sight and how narrow the passages are. See right here, this is only 5 feet. So if you put line of sight right up to the edge here, it's going to be very difficult to get through. So that's why you want to be careful with that sort of thing. Sometimes you don't have a choice, the maps come that way, but if you have any control over it, I do that. The other thing I want to do is change the color of the actual grid. I don't want it this kind of white color. It kind of clashes with the webs and stuff. So what I want to do is kind of theme it with this purple here. So what I'm going to do is go to the tint, and I'm going to pick the color picker here and just hover over dice and see if I can grab some of that purple. So it's obviously that's another layer I can't select, so I'll just go hit through here and I'll color pick my own color depending on what they are. So if I come over to this color picker, let's see, let's choose something like that. And then I'm going to just turn it down a little bit so it's not so obnoxious. And I might even lighten it up a little dark. There we go. Now, if I want to theme the dice after that color, right now it's dark, it's a little darker. So I can go into the dice selection area. And if I'm going to scroll down, I'm using I think this is the artificer dice. So this is the customizer here. If I want to customize it to the color of this map, let's say, you can use this text, kind of color it towards that, or you can use whatever colors you want in your game to kind of theme your dice and your grid colors if you need. Some people don't want to go to that extreme. Maybe you want it opposite, but nonetheless, they're both kind of themed with that color. I'll just kind of leave that there. But as you can see, this went to default because I didn't commit the change. So if I want to go and I want to change the dice body color, it's kind of purplish color, and then hit OK. I have to do that or it's not going to commit. And then for the text, instead of this gray color, I'm going to definitely want to go. What I'll do there is just go to this color selector. You can actually, the alpha slider doesn't work in this case, but there we go. So you can stand out a little bit more, or if you want, you can just use one of the already pre-selected colors for this particular dice pack. Kind of like this one, you can invert them, so that's really, so I like that. Okay, so that's basically the dice and kind of theming it with your map. So let's get back to the line of sight. The other thing I like to do is kind of stretch the map out to when you're not playing and you're actually just setting it up. Get it to be about as wide as you can on your screen. Recommend having a screen at least 19 inches. I don't know what that is in centimeters, but at least have that in, at least 19 inches. Anything smaller than that is going to be a nightmare. If you got a laptop with a little tiny screen, it's going to really suck. Sorry, it's going to be very. So once you have it like this, I'm going to right click on this, go to view and zoom to fit. So that's about where I want to be when I'm working on a map like this. So you set your grid, make sure you have this set to where you can actually see everything, and then take a look at it and see what type of approach you want to go. So this is all going to be caverns. There's really no other features on here that I'm going to have to really worry about. There's these little cocoons and some webbing here, but I'll leave that. So this is really just a big cavern map with a bunch of tunnels. So what I want to do is go to the line of sight tool. And in this line of sight tool, I'm just going to draw really rough lines where the caverns are. and I want to stay off the very edge. So I don't want to place the very edge of the map here. I want to come in and leave some room, because when you move tokens through here, it's going to be a real pain in the butt if you don't leave space. So at least 10 feet. Otherwise, when you move things through here, they're going to get stuck in the walls and you're going to have to move. That's generally what happens. If you got a space that's narrower than 5 feet or 10 feet, it's really going to be a pain in the butt. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the drawing tool, which is this line tool in this case, and I'm in the wall tool. You want to make sure you know what tool you're in before you start drawing. And one thing you can do is hold down the shift key. So I'm going to click on the map, hold down the shift key, and actually drag, and then it will actually make a straight line. So let me first Control Z out of that, and Control Z is how you would undo. So I want to click on the spider map, make sure that I'm putting the line of sight on this layer, and then I'm just going to click on, get the point started, hold down the shift key, and drag over. And what that does, it allows me to actually draw a straight line. I don't have to worry about being perfect or anything like that. And then as far as this goes, you can see, really don't need a ton of data points, but I am going to put a couple extraneous ones in there because I want you to see a tool that comes with Fantasy Grounds that actually helps with it. So if you have a map that's got like 50 zillion different dots on here, it's likely going to cause some issues with lag and such, especially as your campaign builds and depending on the size of the map. The one good example of that would be like Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That one's probably the worst for this sort of thing. And as you can see, I messed up. I didn't actually click on the edge, so we can fix that later. I'm just going to get the bulk of the line work done first. The reason I'm doing this is to show that you don't have to stop here, fix everything as you go. You can actually just keep going and just do all the line work first, and then you can come back later and decide if you want to fix anything. So see, that's crooked and all this stuff. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to come through here and just kind of get a majority of the line work in. That way I can always go back and make a judgment call and decide if I want to put more detail into it or if I want to fix it or whatever. The main thing is to not jump back and forth between while you're working. That causes confusion and it is not very efficient. I mean, some people like to do it as they go. When you have a small amount of work detail to do, that's fine. Just do it. So if you have a large map that you got to work on and you're pressed for time, you really want to just get the majority of the stuff out first, then worry about the finer details. So I'm just kind of putting in these links. These are not necessarily where I want them to go, but if you notice, I'm not really being that careful, and I'm not putting them anywhere in specific that has to be exact. So that's something that I think we get caught up in, this perfection cycle. And what that does is just adds more time, and it's usually unnecessary. Unless you're doing a commercial product for an actual publishing company, I would not worry. So that's all I'm doing right now is just putting in the line work, just doing the basic shapes of the tunnels. And if you notice, I'm not going right to the edge if I can help it. It's unnecessary. You don't have to do that. You want to be able to see some of the texture in the tunnels, but you just don't want them to walk through the wall. That's all you're doing with tunnels, essentially. You don't have to have it right close to the edge, every nook and cranny. It's just not worth it, and it's just a lot of work for nothing. So now that I have a majority of that done, I'll take a quick look over, and it looks like I got most of it done. So let's say we're cool with that. We're going to fix it or whatever. So first things first is I'm going to go to the selection tool. So quite often when you're in the middle of drawing, you want to move a point and then go back to drawing. So that's kind of a problematic because first you have to switch to the selection tool. And if you forget, you're going to draw an extraneous line. So I do all that adjusting after the fact. I don't worry about it until I get all the lines put in, and then I'll go back and fix it. So one of the issues was this here. So I might move this point and then just reconnect it there after the fact. I think that I went in a little bit too far on this one, so I might stretch this here. This might be a little bit too close in. You can kind of go back and decide which points are too close, which ones are too far, maybe remove them or add another point. So to do that, to add another point, what you do is you grab and it's kind of crazy, but you have to add a line. So I'm going to left click and drag. So I'm in the drawing mode right now. So this is just going to make this vertice here. And then I'm going to go to this selection tool, double click, that selects all three of these points, hit the delete key, and there's the point. So if you have to insert a point, you have to draw a line in order to get that vertice. Or the next thing I'm going to do is if you didn't need that or it was something that you want to get rid of, you would just single click it and then come over to the menu and just right click, and that gets rid of that point. So that's how you get rid of points or add points. And it's kind of a tedious process, but it's the best way to do it. The other thing is, see, like I can come back through here and kind of fix these. When I say fix, I just mean adjust them. And then kind of come in and clean up some of these points. Like some of these I went a little bit too far in or not far enough. So that's kind of when you have to decide, how much time you want to. But if you're trying to do this and you're drawing, it can get really tedious and hard to do. And it looks like I missed another connection up here. So you can see these are not actually connected. So I'll go ahead and adjust this line where I want it. And I'll bring this line. So these are the things you do after the fact, after you've drawn all the lines in. So it looks like most of the other ones are questionable or not questionable as much anymore. Like I want to back this off a little bit. I don't want it right there. And in this area it's kind of tight in here. So what I want you to do is back these off a little bit. And that's because when you're coming around the corner and you got more than a couple players or monsters, that's when that can get really. So here, this is almost less than 10 feet. So I want to back this off a little bit. As you'll know in gameplay, it sucks when you have to keep fixing the map so players can get through. So if you have to do that, you hold the shift key, you grab the player's token, and you can move it wherever you want without worrying about the walls. So again, I didn't connect these two, so I'll do that now. And then this one here, I'll bring this down, this point. I'll bring this out. And maybe I want to put another point in there, just kind of get this. So again, I'll just make a line through here. Double click to end the drawing. Double click on these 3 points, hit the delete key. And that made it this extra point. So now I got a little bit more flexibility in where I want to move them. So these are just little tips that you'll learn as you use the tools more and more. What happened is you'll just get accustomed to how it behaves. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect is on these type of tools, is people just don't know how the platform is behaving with certain functions. All right, so that looks all right. That's not too bad. I mean, I don't really like this thing here because it's a rounded curve, but then you have this point here. So if that bothers you, if you're a perfectionist like I am, you can come in and add this other point in here again and select it, double click, hit the delete key. You'll have this other point that you can use. So this is kind of just the little tricks, and you can see that these are not joined. That. This is something you'll learn as you go. So this is actually where the lines were joined and connected before. There we go. All right, so let's just say you have too many points. So I think in this collection of points here, it might be one too many. So if that's the case, make sure you're on the selection tool, double click, which will select all the points in this particular grouping. And if you double click, you'll see all these are highlighted in red. And then there's a tool called Simplify Selected Occluders. So I want to zoom out just so you can see the difference here. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see all these points. I still have them all selected at this point, and then I'm going to hit this Simplify. And basically it took out the wrong one, the one I didn't want, but it simplifies the number. So it doesn't usually do that, but if that's something you're facing, you can always do that. Or if you don't like what it did, you can hit Control Z and go back to the start. So I did Control Z about 3 or 4 times. Let me try that over here. So I'm going to double click, select the points, and then I'm going to click on Simplify Occluders. See, I don't want it to simplify that because that's not going to help me. I'll just move that up. But essentially, it will take and reduce the amount of points in a given section. So like this one here might be another thing that you want to do. So I'll double click on it and click on Simplify Occluder. That actually do it? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, see, it removed a big portion of that, so I don't want that. Sometimes it'll do that. Like it got rid of this little point here. I didn't want it to do that. But it's not the end of the world. Let's come back and adjust this. This might not even need to have this. This just gives you an idea of how this tool can get a little frustrating. There's that. Back that off a little bit. Bring this down a hair. You know, just make your final adjustments towards the end. Oh, I got to connect because I messed around. All right, so once you have all your line work done, now we want to be able to test it. So I didn't make a character yet, but that's really where you want to do is to test these out. You can use an NPC. So I'm going to go to the basically to combat tracker. And I'm going to put 2 different NPCs down. I'm going to put a drow and I'm going to put like a human. That way I can test the lighting and all that stuff. Because one has dark vision, one doesn't. Then I'm going to go to NPCs. And I do have just the SRD loaded pretty much. I mean, I have other books too. But for the main core of it, I just have the SRD. So I'm going to go with drow. So I'll just do this drow variant or drow. And then I'm going to put a scout. This looks like not an elf. That's all I want. Okay. So those are our 2 participants to check this out. So normally when you come to a map like this and you're in play mode, which is the mode that you need to be in, you're going to move tokens. You will have a map, and if it has line of sight on it, the lighting should be enabled and line of sight. So if you don't have those enabled, the player will be able to see everything. That's something you want to check. So I'm going to put the drow on here. Go ahead and add these in. Scout is going to be a friendly. I'm going to add the scout first. So he's down here, and then the drow is going to be way on the opposite side of the map. So I'll go ahead and reveal the drow, drag and drop his token over here. So when I claim the drow, he can actually see because he's got dark vision. And we don't have any ambient light inside the tunnels. And then for the scout, he can't see anything. And when you go to the player preview, this is actually what this player will see. And if you click on this NPC, that's what they see. I'd like to know what this is. This is probably a light leak, this long little stretch here. So I'm going to take a look at that. And that's why you want to test this. So I'm going to go back to the line of sight mode. I want to take a look. Hey, you know, that's actually just interesting. It's like it just barely made it. So I'm going to go through. So that's crazy. I thought it was a light, like when you don't put line of sight on properly, sometimes you'll get those streaks. It just happened to be that one little sliver of area was visible, which may be advantageous for that drow to be able to see that far, but in this case, it was kind of driving me nuts. So these are things you can do to kind of check where this visibility is and kind of take a look at the map before you go in. So when I have this token claimed, which is something you have to do as the game master. So if you don't claim the token and you are in this mode where you have this mode here, which is the player preview mode, you're not going to see anything. So what you have to do in this case is that player is going to have some form of light. So if you don't have it set up on their character sheet or you don't have it ready, you can always come over to the options over here where the effects are, open the effects panel, and if they have a candle or some sort of torch with them, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to actually take the torch. You can either drag it to the token or the combat tracker. I like to drag it to the combat tracker. I know it's going to work. And then once you claim it, this is essentially what that characters can see. That's an important thing to know as the game master, is when you are on the combat tracker and the token is linked to there, you also have to click on that token. So I'm in this player preview mode, and if I click it again, that deselects that token. If I click it again, it selects it. So you see it changes the vision. So the deselect mode is more like the GM mode. When you select the player, that's like the player mode. It's kind of giving you an idea of some of the things that can go wrong or some of the things that you might come across when you're using. It's important to remember to select the token that you're going to be looking through so you can check the vision. And then it goes through for the same thing with this drow. I don't have him selected, so I don't know what he sees. Now, if I turn off the player preview, I can see everything. That's the GM overview. But if I want to know what this drow actually sees, it's nice to have the preview on and click on that, on the actual token. As I move through the tunnel, see that's something that pretty good. Now, when you have, it's like I was telling you earlier, space here is actually less than 10 feet, but it makes up for it over here on the right. You have tunnels like that, and you're trying to go through these windy tunnels. You can get stuck very easily if you make too many little nooks and crannies. Careful with that. So that's essentially the most of the stuff. And then there's a newer feature, Fantasy Grounds, that I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but if you have a token that has like a potion of flying, or maybe it's an Aarakocra, or perhaps it's some form of flight or some kind of levitation or something. So let's just say that this drow here is going to use their innate ability to levitate. The actual tunnel is only maybe 30 feet tall at the most. But if I go to the drow stat block, take a look at this. They don't have levitation. They're not high enough CR level, but if they had that innate ability to levitate, you can do that now with Fantasy Ground. So it only works on the tokens, but essentially you hold down the Alt key and then you mouse wheel forward, and that will dictate how high up in the air they are. So he's actually 25 feet up. So that makes a difference when you are targeting an individual like that. So I'm going to bring the scout around, and if he came around that corner and he sees the drow, he's going to be up in the air on top of the distance between the two. And then when you actually go into your options for Fantasy Grounds, depending on the rule set, and you go to the homebrew rules or the house rules, you can change the map distance. So right now it's on default, so it's going to be a straight 25 plus whatever the distance is. But if you change it to 1.5, it'll calculate the angle. So now if I claim this token, which is the scout, and I hold down the control key and I click on the target, and you can see he's targeted here. Now when I do that, that's 40 feet. So that's helpful when you actually have the height calculated. So if I'm going to click on this drow again, and I'm going to bring him down like 10 feet. Let's say he wants to come down a little bit. Maybe there's some stalagmites in his way or something, stalactites or whatever. So again, I'm going to hold the Alt key. I'm going to dial it down to like 10 feet. I think it's going to be at 15 feet. So now when I mouse over, it's still 40 feet, but that's because he hasn't moved at all. So that calculates based on his height. So if I change this again, and I scroll this down Maybe I'll go up to 30 feet. Yeah, so it changes it by, it'll update this, actually update it. So this way you can kind of calculate, the height, or if they're burrowed or underwater, you can do the same thing. You can go with a negative value. That's another thing. So that's just a feature that was added recently. And I've already went over this before, but I wanted to show this again. And then if for some reason you're able to defeat, let's say the drow defeats the scout here. So I'm going to take this and purposely damage the scout to where they actually die. So I'm going to take the drow stat block and the offense that it has and to just drag and drop the damage onto the scout without actually trying to hit it. Okay, 1. Okay, this is going to take a while. Okay, so he's got heavy damage now, and then we'll do crossbow. See if the crossbow finishes. Okay, so he's now dead, essentially. So if you remove this off of the combat tracker, this token, it's going to leave behind a little blood splatter or whatever you assign. So I'll just double click here, and that gets rid of that. But if I come up with the drow and I move forward, if it's kind of hard to see, it's gray, but the blood splatter's there, and that's what was left behind. Plus, this drow only sees black and white; they don't see color, so they are basically just so they'll know where that person went down. And if you want to change that for the settings on, you can go to the options, go to death markers, and you can change the colors, or you can modify the marker sets and use your own to distinguish which type of blood or which type of, in this case, you can use headstones. If you can actually recolor these to retint them, sort of thing. So, and you can also add your own. There's some options there. But anyway, so that's most of the new features for the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform. So I wanted to show those to you. So there's 2 new dice sets. Fairly recently, they added the death marker and the ability to adjust the height. As a calculation, it was definitely neat. You cannot set height on any features on the map. That's still manual. Still kind of a top-down map is really hard to see the elevation. And then, of course, the character wizard was the next thing. So got the map done. So we checked out a little bit of, I wouldn't say combat, but we checked out some of the features on the map. So I'm going to go to the characters and go to the character wizard. So I just wanted to let you know ahead of time, this has been revised recently and updated and fixed and sort of gone through. As people use it, they're finding more and more things wrong with it, and Smiteworks is actually working to update those and fix it. So it's good. And then I'm going to stretch this down so I can see my options a little bit more. And now I'm going to actually pick a race. So I wanted to do a dwarven for that map or for that particular area. I wanted to use a dwarf, so I'm going to pick dwarf. And you can see it populates that, or hit the plus button to add this to open up, and then you can pick which kind of dwarf you want. So I'm going to pick a hill dwarf. And then it's going to ask for your tool proficiency for race. So in this case, I want Smith's tool. And then if you're going to do an ability score increase, you can pick. So you can change +1 or +2. So I kind of like this +1, +2, but I want to add one instead of to wisdom. I want to add it to strength. There we go. And then the con bonus, I'll leave that as it is. And then those are the changes for the actual race. So if you don't like those choices, you can always click on change race. So now we're going to pick class. So I wanted the barbarian class. And then I'm going to take some proficiencies here. So one of them is going to be survival. The other one is going to be intimidate. I think those are. And then you have your rage and your unarmored defense. This is just something that you might do. And then you can actually level up at this point if you want to not stop at level 1. And when you do that, it will add these things. So I'm going to add my primal path. And the specialization that I want is the Battle Rager. This is the actual Dwarven selection here. And then you can pick your skills. So I want to go with Perception and probably Athletics. That's essentially all I had to do there. And if you're going to multi-class, here at the very bottom, it says that you can do that. You have Danger Sense, Reckless Attack, get Special Battle Rager Armor, which is spiked armor. And then you have your Barbarian feature. So that's pretty cool. And now when you go to abilities, there's a couple ways you can do this. So you can go to the method. You can actually just override by adding a number here in the override section, or you can do dice roll or manual entry. So I'm going to just roll some dice here. So this uses the 4d6, drop the lowest. I'm going to drop that, and these are the numbers that I got. They're not too bad. So it has it kind of straight across here. So if I want to, I can swap any of these out. So dexterity is fine. Yeah, I don't mind that at all. So wisdom of 10, intelligence 9, charisma 9, 15 con, 15 strength, 12 dex. Perfect. Couldn't have asked for a better standard array. So this is showing you where the racial bonuses come in, and then the base, you can actually swap these out. So if you wanted to move wisdom into intelligence, you can do that. Just drag and drop, which is much easier than using those arrows. And then, of course, you have your background. So this guy is a kind of a hill dwarf battle rager type. So he used to be a gladiator. So I'm going to go ahead and add skill proficiency. He gets disguise kit and 1 physical instrument. And I think I'm going to get him drum, hand drum. This is kind of what it is. That's going to be his proficiencies of what he can use, especially when he's doing his battles and stuff. And now the equipment. So you can pick a kit or starting wealth. So I'm just going to pick a kit. And then you're basically getting the Explorer's kit here, or the Explorer's pack. And I can choose the instrument. So even though I'm proficient with those instruments, I don't necessarily own them. So I wanted to grab a drum. And then for weaponry, I kind of like the longsword, only because it's more versatile. But he's a battle axe guy, so definitely battle axe. We'll do that. And then for actual throwing or missile range, I'm going to give him some light hammer. You can actually throw those. Or javelins, whatever. Spear was a nice one. I think hand axe is another weapon I might choose, but light hammers. And then, of course, your third choice, I think what I'll do here is I'll give him a dagger for up close range type thing. And that's essentially it. And then if you want to add items, you can by clicking on this plus button, and you click the down arrow. Then you can page through, see what kind of stuff you want. Yeah. So I want to get him his armor, so I don't think that it did that. So what I'm going to do is type spiked. Yeah, spiked armor. So I'm going to put that in his inventory because that's something that he essentially was supposed to get anyway. So that's part of his feature, his background. So that's that. And then I'm going to hit commit. And once you do that, it gives you the summary to check over your work. So at this point, before you hit save, this is where you can go back and make changes. That's important because once you do this, and once you hit commit or save, it's going to save it and write it as to a record. So I'm just going to call this a level 3 Battle Rager Dwarf. And that way I know what it is. And if you do it like this every time, like a naming convention, it's easier for you to find those if you want to import them so you know what they are. So level 3 Battle Rager Dwarf. And that way I know what it is. And I'll hit save. Once you hit save, it's going to write all of that to the character record. And then you're going to have this actions tab, in which, by the way, I do have Rob Tui's coding effects enabled, and it's adding these extra These FGU added are essentially things that were added by Fantasy Grounds, and then the stuff up here was added by the actual plugins and such that I'm using. So I want to get rid of Stone Cunning. I don't need that. Get rid of Reckless Attack. The Rage is calculated here, which is good. You get 2 Rages. So I'll probably just leave this or get rid of that, and I'll just add that to the other one. So I'll show you how to do that. Dwarven Resilience, that's already on here. This is the way I can check. Danger Sense is already on there. And then Battle Rager Armor. Alright, so now that I have that, now I can go to the preparation mode and set the amount of rages. So it's 2 daily, level 3. And if you didn't know that, you can look it up in the class and go to the class features. It says here. So once you have raged, number of times show for your barbarian level, then you have to do a long rest. So in order to find that, you have to refer to the barbarian table in order to know how many. Some of you have already memorized it. Got 3 light hammers that he can throw. I'm going to get rid of the javelin. I need that. And he has this battle axe up here. So I'm going to change that to 2-handed. And does he have a shield? So this is another thing I like to set up in case. So if I go to abilities, go to inventory, check that out. So he does not have a shield, so I don't have to worry about unequipping and equipping the weapons. And he's disadvantaged at stealth because of the spiked armor for stealth checks. And the stealth armor gives him a 1d4 plus 3 attack bonus with his piercing damage with the armor. So if he charges somebody, he can do that. So it comes out of the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. And it says, attempting to open link for modules not installed. So if I go to the actual assets here in modules, I do have Sword Coast Adventures Guide enabled, but it might want the DM version. Take a look. But it does say player, so I'm not sure why it did that. But anyways, so that's where you'd look that up, that feature. And then you can also look it up here on the ability. So this one actually comes up. So it may just be the way that the powers are linked. But anyway, so that's how you do that. And then when you're done, you can select an image for this character. So I might do something like that. And there's some Fantasy Grounds ones that they actually see wizards, warriors. I'll do some kind of warrior. These all look more human or elf. So I might go back and pick. Let's see, let's go with that comes from Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So I'm going to probably. But anyways, there are some default ones that come with Fantasy Grounds. So there's a Fantasy Grounds Fantasy folder that you can use for default portraits. That becomes his token if you don't have one. So we got that. I'll just take this generic one here. Go. Once that's done, I'll put him on the combat tracker. Open that up, see what we got. On his actions tab, what I'm going to do is add these in because they're passive. So here's the combat and the actual actions. I'm going to put on his Dwarven Resilience because that's something that stays on all the time. So these actions actually were added as I built the character. Sometimes they add some of the stuff, sometimes not. This depends on what you have loaded and the content that you are using and such, and the rule set. And of course, I need to add this +1 here, dagger, one that you can throw potentially. And then for inventory, I go in and clean this up. Some of the stuff got doubled up, not a big deal. Extra pouch or big deal. So here you can actually take this and assign a location. So for location, I have a backpack, so anything I don't really need to use right away or that it's not equipped, just go in the back. So that's what you do to kind of differentiate what you have equipped. And then we're going to get rid of the javelin. And the light hammer, we had actually 3. And lock of hair, I'm going to put that in the pouch. Might be from his lady friend. That. Have some rations here that I might track later. So this is just a way to organize stuff. So here's a torch. That'll go in the backpack. Water skin, backpack. Even though it may not be in it, it might just be hanging from. The tinderbox I'm actually going to put in a pouch. This is how you kind of nest the content within containers. That's just a way that you can help organize your stuff. That kind of gives you an idea where the stuff is. What's nice about that is if you're carrying the backpack and you want to get rid of the weight, you can actually unequip it, and that drops the weight down. When you go ahead and carry it again, it adds the weight. So it added 10 more pounds of weight. You could also do that for things that, like if you wanted to treat this like like basically you treat it like a bag of holding. You could call something bag of holding and then take the weight off of the items, and then only carry so much bulk. I mean, you have to use common sense with that, but nonetheless, that's that goes. So we have an action here, bonus action to rage and bash into someone with armor, like a bonus attack. And then we have reckless attack for the barbarian. We have our rages set up, so when we use them, we can check this off. So there's an items tab here. I'm going to add a custom item. So I'm going to click on this green plus item. I'm just going to call this rations. Then I'm going to have another one I'm going to put for the water skin. You don't have to do this. This is kind of getting really nitpicky, but what I would do with this is just track my goods here. So in the preparation mode, here's one, and then you only put once because you can't use that more than once. I got 10 torches, so I'm going to change that to 10 and change that to once. Then the ration, same thing, 10. So now when I go back to combat, there's a little button. So as I check these off, you end up checking all these off, it'll disappear off your sheet, which I don't have anymore. And since I have it set to once, they're not going to replenish on a long or short rest. That's how you do that. So this one is set up as probably daily for the rages. But for consumable items, you don't do that. But if you want to get it back, so let's say you went and collected water, you just go to standard mode, uncheck it, and then go back to your combat actions mode, and that will. So that's essentially just how to build one type of character. So I made a Dwarven Battle Rager. Now, if I wanted to recall the map that the players are on, and I didn't know which map it was, I can double click on their token, and that will bring up the map that they were on last. I'll claim the token, and then I'm going to take the Battle Rager and actually put him on the map. So he is basically the same situation. He's got dark vision as well. But this time he wants to engage the drow, but he's like 30 feet up in the air. So I'm going to click on this token here, hold down the control key, and that makes him 30 feet up in the air. So that's how high he is up. Had we not had that other feature, it'd only show like 5 or 10 feet. It's kind of nice. Now that he's done that, it's his turn, essentially. I'm going to go to the offense page here and open up his actions tab. What he's going to do is throw one of his light hammers up there. So I'm just going to double click on this ammo drone version. And that's an 18. That scores a hit. So that hammer, he hucks it up into the darkness there, and it tags that drow. So now just double click on damage. It does a total of 7 points of damage. Ouch. So that hurt. So I pass the turn. The drow is going to return fire with his hand crossbow. So I'll just take this, drag and drop it down to Battle Rager Dwarf. And he missed. So it went click, and it just plopped on the side of him somewhere, like hit the ground basically. Tick. So that, that's kind of thing you do. So he might have cast a spell or something at that point, but that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to kind of show you how this works. So we did a thing where we put together the map, showed you some of the new features, did a little bit of line of sight work with some tips there, and then we did like a little bit of battle and how this might be applied. So anyways, I think that'll be good for today. I don't want to ramble on much longer. You guys have a good week. Happy Friday, St. Patrick's Day, all those sort of things. And next week, I'm going to be doing GaryCon, I think Thursday and Sunday, and going to be doing a Fantasy Grounds presentation. So if you guys know anyone who wants to learn more about Fantasy Grounds, it's a free event for GaryCon. And then not to mention maps again that I made were by Moepsii maps. So if I go over, I showed that earlier, so I put the links